Triglycerides are the major form of lipid found in the body. Again, around 95% of the lipids found in the body and in our food sources are going to be triglycerides. So the structure of triglycerides, you can see here, this image is from your text, and the structure is made of a glycerol backbone and then 3 fatty acids. So that's how we get the tri, so tri meaning 3, and then glycerols. The differences in fatty acids will be their chain length, so how long they are, how many chains there are, and then the degree of saturation. So fatty acids or triglycerides can be either unsaturated or saturated. And we'll talk more about that, what that means on the slide. So saturated means that it is filled to capacity with hydrogen atoms. So we can see here that there are no double bonds. So it is fully saturated, or it is full of hydrogen. An unsaturated fatty acid, on the other hand, has at least one point where it is not full of hydrogen. So we can see here that there's a double bond, making this unsaturated. I have pictures here to demonstrate that a saturated fat is going to be solid, and an unsaturated fat is usually going to be liquid because it is not full of the hydrogen. This picture demonstrates again the types of fatty acids. So again, we have our saturated, which is full of the hydrogen atoms. Monounsaturated means that there is one point of unsaturation. And then polyunsaturated means that there are 2 or more points of unsaturation. So monounsaturated and polyunsaturated together are classified under the realm of unsaturated fat. So we have saturated and unsaturated, and then within unsaturated, we have monounsaturated fats, which may be referred to as MUFAs, M-U-F-A, and then the polyunsaturated fat might be called PUFAs, so P-U-F-A. So we have our MUFAs and our PUFAs. The degree of saturation affects the melting temperature of different fats. So the more unsaturated that a fat is, generally the more liquid it will be at room temperature. The more saturated a fat is, the more solid it will be at room temperature. There are several exceptions to this rule, and we'll talk about these in a few slides. But in general, unsaturated is going to be liquid, and saturated is going to be solid. And that saturation is, again, taking place because the structure is fully saturated or full of those hydrogen atoms. When we're looking at the hardness, softer are generally going to be healthier. So our more unsaturated fatty acids are going to be healthier. So the recommendation is usually to replace saturated or solid fats with mono and polyunsaturated fats. Saturated fats are generally are associated with negative health outcomes, and we'll talk more about these in the coming slides. So that's why the recommendation is to focus on unsaturated fats. This figure from your book, figure 5.1, does a nice job looking at the fatty acid composition of various common fats. So you can see that animal fats tend to have higher amounts of saturated fatty acids, whereas our liquid and our oils are going to have more mono and polyunsaturated fats. Again, one exception is going to be coconut oil. So coconut oil comes from a plant, but it is one of the few plant sources that is actually a saturated fat. And we'll talk about coconut oil in a couple of slides. So I would definitely encourage you to check out this figure because it does a really nice job comparing the fatty acid composition. Fat is found in both plant and animal sources, so we find fat in our meat, poultry, and fish, in eggs, milk and milk products, oils and margarines, and nuts and seeds. Generally, the fat coming from animal sources is going to be more saturated, whereas those coming from plant products are going to be more unsaturated. Let's take a closer look at saturated fats. So these are going to be found in animal products, and again, generally they're going to be solid at room temperature. Saturated fats are associated with increased LDL, which stands for low density lipoprotein or bad cholesterol, decreased HDL or high density lipoprotein or good cholesterol, and overall this can increase the risk of heart disease. So we really want to limit our saturated fat intake because of these negative effects it may have on our cholesterol. So coconut oil, again, is one of the few plant sources of saturated fat. So for the most part, plant sources are going to be unsaturated and generally more healthy for us. So coconut oil contains no hydrogenation, and its state can really differ depending on the temperature. So it can be solid, semi-solid, or liquid depending on the room temperature. So if you heat up coconut oil, it becomes liquid, but generally at room temperature, it's going to be solid. And like all other plant products, coconut oil does not contain any cholesterol. Cholesterol is only found in animal products. So coconut oil is better than butter and trans fats because it is a plant product, but it's probably not as good as liquid vegetable oils, and there is really limited evidence on the disease outcome. So you may have heard how coconut oil will cure everything, but there is really no proven evidence on this. There may be, it may have some health benefits, but this isn't completely proven yet. So I wouldn't disband all other fat sources for the time being because fat is still fat, and we're still concerned about the amount we're intaking. So you can think about fat like we talked about sugars. Sugars aren't causing obesity, fats aren't causing obesity. It's really the amount that we're consuming. When we look at unsaturated fats, these are found in plants, oils, and fatty fish. Generally, they're going to be liquid at room temperature. And again, they're classified as monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. So monounsaturated fats are found in olives, peanut butter, peanut oil, avocados, and almonds, and these are considered health neutral. So they don't have a negative effect on health, but they don't really have a super positive effect on health either. So really they're health neutral, but they are a better choice than our saturated fats. Polyunsaturated fats are found in our oily fishes, so things like our sardines or salmon, safflower oil, sunflower oils, and these are beneficial because they can help to lower cholesterol levels. So both monounsaturated and polyunsaturated do have some health benefits. So we've covered triglycerides as one of our classes of lipids. One of the other classes was phospholipids. So phospholipid is made up of a glycerol, 2 fatty acids. So a triglyceride has 3, a phospholipid has 2 fatty acids, plus a phosphorus, and this is all combined with oxygen. So the phosphorus component of the phospholipid really makes the phospholipid be soluble in water. In this case, phospholipids can be considered emulsifiers. So think back to your chemistry classes where you have an oil and water emulsion. So this is exactly what a phospholipid is. So you might have heard of a phospholipid bilayer, and this is where phospholipids come in because they play a key role in stabilizing our cell membrane. So because they have that phosphorus side, one side really is water-loving, so hydrophilic, and then we have our hydrophobic side that's water-fearing. So this helps to stabilize our cell membrane. It also, phospholipids may also generate signals in response to hormones. So one example might be insulin. Our last class of lipids is sterols. So sterols are rings of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They're very large molecules of these interconnected rings. So cholesterol is going to be found in all animal membranes, and it serves as the raw material or the precursor for bile. So bile is very important for the digestion and absorption of our lipids. We talked a little bit about bile in our week about body systems. We'll talk more about that in a coming segment. It's also a precursor for vitamin D and steroid hormones like our sex hormones. Again, cholesterol is the structure of cell membrane, so again, it's going to be found in all animal products, but it is, and while it's necessary to the body's functioning, it's not essential in the diet, so it can be made by the body. So it's not essential, and too much cholesterol in the body can actually form plaque, and this can lead to atherosclerosis, which can lead to heart disease. So there can definitely be some negative consequences associated with cholesterol. And we'll talk more about specific recommendations for all of the different fat in general, and then the different components or the different types of fat in one of the coming segments. Also with sterols, we have our plant sterols. So these have a very similar composition or a very similar structure to cholesterol, and they can actually compete with cholesterol for absorption. So instead of absorbing cholesterol, these plant sterols can bind to the same things as cholesterol would and therefore inhibit cholesterol absorption and mitigate or prevent some of those negative effects that might be associated with excess cholesterol intake. So you might see different products in the store saying that they have plant sterols. So sometimes things like butter or margarine might have plant sterols added, and it'll probably have a little note on there or a little claim like we've talked about how it may help with cholesterol, lowering cholesterol. So something for you to look for. So more food for thought.